Team are holding aloft reads Max P1, Checo P2, and Constructors Champions. That's their season. This is him taking his 19th trip to the top step.
Aliens in the Paddock is back. If you've been asleep over the past few months waiting for F1 to start, here is a quick rundown of everything that happened over the winter break. Toto Wolff. It wasn't long after season 2023 ended and there were allegations against Toto Wolff and his wife Susie Wolff, who has a prominent position at the FIA as a current managing director of the FIA's driving academy. These allegations came from a team principal meeting where Toto Wolff supposedly suggested or implied that he knew something in that meeting that he only would have known if someone from the FIA had told him. I guess the implication is that he knew a piece of information because Susie, who works at the FIA, had told him. Toto and Susie lashed back at the claims, and this coincided with one of the most interesting moments in Formula One, where every team released a statement on their social media in support of the Mercedes part owner and team principal Toto. With this movement of all the teams coming up in support of Toto Wolff and Mercedes, the FIA had to back down. Kind of crazy to think that this could have been the biggest story of the winter break if it wasn't for everything else that happened. Next, Guenther Steiner gets booted from Haas F1. It's no secret that Haas F1 was pretty much the Guenther Steiner F1 team, and since the popularity of Drive to Survive, he has really become the face of the team. In a shock to him and the wider Haas team, Guenther Steiner was relieved of his position. Allegedly, Gene Haas, the owner of the team, wasn't satisfied with the results of the team over the past few years. Haas have been in F1 for over 160 races and have never had a podium. Guenther was replaced by Ayo Komatsu, who's previously the Director of Engineering, and he was also with the team since the start. Unofficial reports were that Guenther was begging Gene Haas for more investment into the team, suggesting that progress was impossible at this point without more money. Look, he was fighting for the team to get more money, and I don't foresee them getting a podium anytime soon, even with the switch up. Next big story, Andretti Motorsport denied entry into Formula One. One of the biggest names in American motorsport, Andretti definitely have a legacy that made sense as the 11th grid team. But the FIA denied their application. The way the FIA denied Andretti's application into Formula One was really strange. They said that Andretti would be benefiting so much from joining Formula One and F1 would be benefiting very little, and that it didn't make sense for them to enter the grid because it could potentially devalue Formula One. It's kind of an ugly way of saying, yeah, you're not cool enough to hang with us. Yeah, sure, people in the States know who you are, but no one in the rest of the world does, which I actually don't think is true. Okay, so a couple of name changes on the grid. AlphaTauri have changed their name to Visa Cash App RB. Rumours were pretty consistent prior to the announcement that they would be changing their name to Racing Bulls, but officially the RB in the name Visa Cash App RB does not stand for Racing Bulls, which I guess means it stands for Red Bulls, I think. So the name is objectively terrible. Alright, one more name change. We have Steak Kick Sauber F1. I think this one is not as bad because most of the time they're just going to be called Sauber during a race. They will not be referred to as stake when racing in jurisdictions that restrict gambling advertising. I like the colour scheme of these cars, although the sponsorship on this team seems really tacky. Sprint weekends. The format of the sprint weekends are changing this year. Look, I've never minded the idea of having a slightly different format some weekends during the F1 calendar. However, I think the format of sprint weekends were confusing. Firstly, because sprint qualifying is called a sprint shootout, and just call it what it is, it's the sprint qualifying. You would hear the commentator say sprint shootout, and then they would always clarify that the sprint shootout was the qualifying for the sprint race. So just call it a sprint qualifying. That hasn't changed. It will still be called the shootout. What the sprint weekend format was: free practice 1, sprint shootout, the Grand Prix qualifying, then the sprint race, and then the Grand Prix. The problem with this format is that the sprint race is really just a mini Grand Prix, and if teams can't make changes to their cars in between the sprint race and the Grand Prix, because of course they can't, because qualifying has already happened, the sprint was just going to be a mini Grand Prix, and the rub-on effect of that was that the Grand Prix would be slightly less interesting, as the setups for the cars were already established. This year the format will be free practice 1, sprint shootout, sprint race, Grand Prix qualifying, and then the Grand Prix. There has been no announcement as of recording if Parc Fermé will be open between the sprint race and the Grand Prix qualifying. I really hope they do, as this allows for a more interesting and unpredictable Grand Prix. Open Parc Fermé between the sprint and the quali. Please, do it for the fans. Sprint weekends were fine, it's just that they were boring because the sprint was just a mini Grand Prix. It isn't looking good from my perspective, or from Christian Horner's perspective, the current racing director of Red Bull. Allegations of misconduct in the workplace with a female employee arose about a week or so ago. If the allegations are true, it's really tough to see Horner maintaining his position as team principal at Red Bull F1. It certainly seems like Red Bull's Austrian board are ready to see him depart the team. Hamilton is leaving Mercedes to Ferrari, arguably the biggest sporting story of the last few years. I'm sure you know that Hamilton is moving to Ferrari for at least 2 years, commencing in 2025, making this current year his last year with Mercedes, unless he goes back to Mercedes after being at Ferrari, which I don't see happening. He'd probably just rather retire. I don't know if it's true that Hamilton's long-time dream was to race at Ferrari. I'm sure it was to some extent, but now that the dust has settled on this story, I think that this is a good move for Hamilton, and it will force Mercedes to rethink their next few years. George Russell has what it takes to be a race winner, but like many others, I don't see him as championship material. Prove me wrong, George. Prove me wrong. I'd love to see you take a championship. So what I look forward to seeing now, the most, other than seeing Hamilton in a Ferrari, is what Mercedes do with that empty seat. Are they going to pick someone more senior to replace Hamilton as a short-term replacement, or are they going to get someone super young and really hope that they can bring a young driver into maturity and generate another championship-winning driver? Okay, that's it. Those are my biggest stories over the break. I didn't get into things like track contract extensions, driver contracts, and car liveries and car announcements and stuff like that. So if I missed out anything that you like, let me know down below what it was, and I'll let you know what I think. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Give this video a like, maybe leave me a comment and let me know how I'm doing. I'm going to keep trying making these videos. If there is one person watching each time, I'm enjoying making them, so I don't see why I would stop. See you next time. This is Aliens in the Paddock. I almost didn't say the name. This is Aliens in the Paddock.